Welcome to Wonderland Weekly, hosted by Toronto Ty. Now sit back and have a wonderful week.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, we'll wrap it up. All kidding aside, we got time for a few questions, so you'll have to speak loudly so we can hear you. Is that Ken?
Yep. What is going on with Guardian and Sledgehammer this year? Sledgehammer's got 2 pods down, and Guardian, was there having issues with the projectors and that on Guardian?
So 2-part question, what's going on with Guardian and what's going on with Sledgehammer? So Sledgehammer, everybody knows, is a prototype ride. It's one of a kind in the world. Same with Guardian. Sledgehammer, we've got a DeviceNet. DeviceNet is a communication protocol that we use for communicating between the pods and the main ride. So we've got a problem with DeviceNet on 2 of those gondolas. Our solution would be either to shut the ride down for a lengthy period of time to rewire it, or to run without those 2 units. So we've elected to continue to run it so people can enjoy it. This winter we're going to upgrade the communication network on that ride, go to a different system, and replace it. So hopefully, Colin will not have those challenges to deal with in the future. The question about Guardian, once again, Guardian's a prototype ride. That ride has its own challenges. It is in an environment that's not friendly to the projectors. We have elected to go to 2D on that ride to provide a more reliable experience for our guests and provide a better visual system. Keeping the 3D clear and crisp was not always the best. So going to 2D has made that easier for us, and it has also made the ride more reliable. So for 2020, we will remain at 2D. The zombie experience will be 2D, and that's our approach. So, next. Okay, 2-part question. One was about the naming of Yukon Striker. So those of you who have been around the park for a few years have noticed our push to develop a brand around Yukon, or the Frontier Canada. So we started with Soaring Timbers, we added Lumberjack, we added Flying Canoes, we added the Canyon Trader Company building, we added 3 more buildings with Yukon Striker, we brought in the Anchor Ride. Yukon Striker was a name that rose to the top of the naming list because we wanted it to be connected to the Frontier Canada theme area. Some people ask, why didn't we go with the 3rd name in the trifecta of Behemoth, Behemoth, Leviathan, and Ziz, and Ziz didn't fit with that brand, so we couldn't do it. And many of our guests, outside of the enthusiast group, wouldn't really understand that 3-way connection anyway. So it didn't make a lot of sense for our core business. The second question, what was it again? I don't know that it was remade from anything. It was developed from scratch for this. You're talking about the bird? Oh, Major Mac, yeah. Sorry, I thought you were talking about the Yukon Striker. So Major Mackenzie, he is a costume character that wanders the streets of Frontier Canada. Yeah, he was recreated from a character that existed in the park in 1986. That is correct, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Speaking of Frontier Canada, why did you decide to resurrect the idea of Frontier Canada instead of creating?
So the question was, why did we resurrect the theme area of Frontier Canada? So Frontier Canada was a proposed theme area back in 1981 when the park was first built. It was originally planned to be opened in 82, 83, something like that. The park didn't see its attendance numbers that it was originally projected to achieve, and that idea was shelved. We built a water park instead. The 2 anchor rides at the time would have been Minebuster and Whitewater Canyon. Those 2 rides were built. but nothing else in that area was developed. So we wanted to kind of close that loop and come back to completing that theme area, the Frontier Canada. We felt it was something that the park needed, something that would give us a brand to work towards and to fill in those gaps. So that's what we did. We built it piece by piece. We couldn't afford to do it all in 1 year, so we did it inch by inch, and we've got there now. So, sorry?
Are the motors for Yukon Striker all the same?
I'm gonna let Colin answer that. The question was about motors on Yukon Striker. So.
No, so Leviathan itself is bigger than all the other motors that we have in the park. I believe, if I remember correctly, it's in the 500 kilowatt range, which is around 800 or 900 horse. The lift chain motor at the base of Yukon Striker is actually identical to the Behemoth lift chain motor. Exact size, frame size, we could quite literally swap it 1-to-1. The drop chain motor at the top of Yukon is actually smaller than the Behemoth and Yukon lift chain motors.
Someone had asked me earlier today what size that motor was, and I gave the wrong answer, and Colin corrected me.
It's the lift chain at Yukon Striker is 396 kilowatts, which is about 520, 530 horsepower. And the drop chain motor is 317 kilowatt, which is about 425 horsepower. DC motors.
Okay, I know Leviathan runs at about 4.5 meters a second, and I think this one's about 4 meters per second. It's a little bit slower.
How did you guys come up with the award-winning base system for Yukon Striker?
So the question was about the loose article bin system. It came from a photograph that I saw of a park in China, Happy Valley Chengdu. They had a similar system on a dive coaster there. It didn't have what we wanted it to have, so we took that system and improved on it. Colin and I spent a fair bit of time this past winter developing that system and working with a conveyor manufacturer. Colin designed the control system for it, and we used common devices used in industry. So it's the same conveyor system that's used at the Honda plant in Alliston, the same system that's used in GM, the Ford plants, and these systems bring parts to the line, basically. We wanted a system that would be reliable and would run like a clock and not stop. We wanted it to be simple. The guests could load their items into the bins and retrieve them at the end. We wanted it to be out of reach of other guests, and we think we've come up with a system that's reliable and service proven and suits the needs that we had. So we hope to be able to carry that through and put it on other rides.
Do you know if Guardian's going to have that bin system as well in the future?
Question was about would Guardian have it? Colin and I are exploring that now to see if it's feasible. We believe it's feasible. The question is, can we afford to do it? And if we can, we will. So that's something we're exploring. So.
Peter, I was wanting to ask you this earlier, but who the heck came up with Lightning? Yes, it used to be famous in the old days, but now it is called a headbanger. And I was just wondering, I heard it's on the room of chopping boards, and I'll pay you gazillions just to chop it down. Do a double coaster together. Like that, and I will put together just headbang.
So the ride is what I call a canned ride. It's made by Vekoma. So they made many models, or many versions, or many copies of that same ride all over the world. Vekoma is based in the Netherlands. They designed it, they built it, they worked with us to install it. It's not on the list to be replaced, and even if we passed the hat around and everyone chipped in $1,000, we couldn't build another ride. Yeah, we could talk about it another time, I guess. There.
So with the success of the ride bins, has any other parks reached out to you guys to try to see what your basically your blueprints look like or anything?
Yeah, Kings Island is building that new coaster next year, and you will likely see a very similar system on that ride at Kings Island. They've been my counterpart at Kings Island has contacted me a few times about it, looking for more details. So we'll share that with him, and I think it makes sense. So.
I'll answer Skyhawk first. Skyhawk is having a little bit of issues this year. It's similar to Sledgehammer, where it's got specific communication. This type, it's Ethernet. However, Ethernet going through slip rings. And that tends to cause a little bit of problems. We're working on solutions to improve it for next year, because it tends to fault in the bottom position where there's no real issues. We continue to run it, but yeah, we're looking at fixing that for next year for sure. And you want to talk about the golden ticket?
Yes. So, question was about the golden ticket award, and would we post that or display that award somewhere? It's not a very big award. It's tiny. It's sitting in our office on one of the filing cabinets now, but we don't have any intent to put it out in the park and display it. We didn't build the system to get in the running for an award. That's not why we did it. It's nice to be recognized, but we don't flaunt our successes that way. We try to provide a quality product and yeah, let the guest attendance numbers show the success of that work or not, right?
You did win the golden ticket. That's the important thing. We won a golden ticket.
Yeah, Canada's Wonderland doesn't typically win golden ticket awards because we're not in Ohio or Pennsylvania. So, anyway, I'm very proud of this park. I think we have a great park here, a very beautiful park, with a great variety of equipment. So I don't feel bad when we don't win an award from the Golden Ticket group, because I'm confident in what we provide to our guests. Yeah, so we'll go over here.
On the topic of Skyhawk, why is it a lot less flippy this year?
So the question was, why is it a lot less flippy? So the question was about Skyhawk, and for those of you who have not ridden Skyhawk, it is an interactive ride where you can change the pitch of the wings to get you to invert or get into a rotation. So this past winter, we did receive a bulletin from Gerstlauer, the manufacturer of the ride, asking us to make a change to that wing position so that the wings can't pitch as far as they used to. The manufacturer wanted us to limit how steep you could get that wing. I don't know if they had an issue at another park or not, but there was a reason. They had a reason to make that change, so we had to make that change, and that's why it's a little bit more challenging now than it used to be. Okay, two questions. The first one was about Sledge. I'll let Colin answer that.
We're talking about the DeviceNet issues Peter was talking about earlier. So DeviceNet, like you said, is a communication protocol. It works on a very low voltage. Without getting into specifics, rule number one when you use DeviceNet is not to be used on slip rings. Slip rings are For those who don't know, copper ring with a brush that travels around is meant to pass power from one point to another on a rotating machine. Device Smith doesn't like that very much at all. For us to try to replace those slip rings, like Peter said, it was going to take us quite a bit to get them manufactured, get them in here. So for us, at this point, it's easier to keep those units down, and we'll look at long-term solutions over the winter.
The other question was about the police cars in the backlot stunt coaster track. They are dusty, yes. And then we'll go red shirt up there.
With you guys getting Winterfest, is it something that are you guys looking at having rides, especially coasters, running? If not, what's the biggest issue with it, and is it something you're aiming for the future?
So the question was about Winterfest and running rides in the winter. We will run select rides. They will all be family rides, smaller rides, meant for the children to enjoy. We will not run any coasters. The coasters are not designed to operate in our environment at that time of year. So we will not be running any coasters. We haven't run these rides in the winter before, so it's a bit of a learning time for us, and we will attempt to run rides like the Rage and Nightmares. Those will be the biggest rides that we'll run. But there'll be things like Snoopy versus Red Baron and Snoopy's Space Race, Pumpkin Patch, and the rides up in the back of the park there. But the event is not intended to be a ride-based event. The rides are going to be extra to the rest of the event. The event is meant to be ice skating on the International Street. It's meant to be meeting up with Santa Claus or Mrs. Claus or writing a letter to Santa Claus. It's a family event. It's not a ride event. And that's the intention. Okay. We'll go up here.
How fast does Backlash Stunt Coaster launch at?
How fast does Backlash Stunt Coaster launch at? I don't know. Colin's saying 50 miles an hour, so I don't know that answer. Yeah, it's not on the tip of my tongue, but we could get that info. I'm sure it's on our website as well, or on Wikipedia. It might be there too. We'll go down here.
Will Mountain Bay Cliff be built in-house or by a different manufacturer?
So the question was Mountain Bay Cliffs, will it be built in-house or by a different manufacturer? So all of our projects that we do work with local contractors to build things. So on Yukon Striker, when we built that, we worked with B&M. They manufactured the ride. They did not install it. We hired local contractors to install it. They didn't build the station. We had to hire a local engineer to design the station and another company to build it. So with Mountain Bay Cliffs, we'll do it the same way. We'll hire a structural engineer we've already engaged in. He'll design the pool and design the structure to leap from, and then we'll hire local contractors to build it. We don't do any construction ourselves. We're involved with the construction process. We manage the contract and manage the project, meeting with the contractors every week to make sure that they're meeting milestones and meeting our safety requirements. So, who hasn't asked yet? Right here. Sorry, we got an answer on backlot. It is 38 miles per hour, 17 meters a second.
With this new guide next year, how do you prevent guests from belly flop?
Question is, with the Mountain Bay Cliffs, how do you prevent somebody from doing a belly flop? You can't really prevent that. It's like going to a community pool and jumping off a 3-meter board and doing a belly flop. All you can do is ask them to jump feet first, and I guess need to take responsibility for themselves, and that's a big part of what we do. Riders have a responsibility as well. We cannot take responsibility for what riders do on our rides. We can ask them to do certain things, sit a certain way, and keep your arms and legs inside, but when people misbehave, or when they do silly things, they get hurt. People dislocate shoulders, putting their arms up at wrong points in the ride. People do crazy things, and they end up getting hurt because of it. So if they don't follow the instructions, that's a problem. All right? Go up there with the camera.
So I was curious about Soaring Timbers. It seems to have some specific requirements, for example, like a minimum rider number in order to run. I was curious if you could speak to that, and also just, what the process or what the thought process was in getting that ride specifically.
Question was about Soaring Timbers and the loading requirements and why we need to have a minimum number of riders. So that ride is similar to Shockwave, similar to, what's another one? It's got a counterweight on the other side, and the ride needs that counterweight in order to move that gondola around. The gondola is quite large. The problem is if the load on the ride is less than what the counterweight is, and we have a power problem, then the counterweight will come down to the bottom rather than the gondola come back down to the bottom. So that's why we need to load it in a certain way, so that if we do have a power problem, our guests aren't stopped up at the top, they are stopped down at the bottom. That's the reason behind that. What was the other question? Something.
It was the process of, or the thought process of selecting that ride.
The thought process behind selecting that ride, that goes back a couple of years now. We had an agreement to purchase a ride that fell through. We weren't able to get the ride that we wanted. So we were in a spot where we needed to move quickly and get a ride that was already built, basically. Mondial had that ride in their factory. It had been sold back to them from one of their other customers, and they were in the midst of refurbishing it. So it was an opportunity for us to work together again, and we took that opportunity.
Just wondering, so for the new cliff diving in Scotland, whereabouts is it going to be located?
So the question was about cliff jumping, the Mountain Bay cliffs. It'll be located between Black Hole and the Wave Pool, closer to the cabana end of that berm. That's where it will go. Okay, down here.
Do you know why you're getting rid of the backless stunt coasters effects?
Question was about getting rid of backless stunt coasters effects. That was a result of reliability issues and being able to keep them running. Water and rides don't work well together, and we had a lot of water on that ride, and it led to other issues with the ride, affecting the performance of the ride itself, not just the effects. The water was quite harsh on the equipment, especially in our environment here. So we'll go next with the phone.
It's like how Carrie said about building blocks and everything, and now it's up to us to pick our actions. But what will you do for the cell phones? Because this year there's getting more cell phones out than ever. What will you do about the cell phones? Because no offense, even I'm not scared of it, but yeah, a little scared. But now it's even making me more scared for kids to go on rides because a cell phone can easily hit someone right in the eye. One of my friends got hit with a coin, and my friend Kim got hit with keys right in the face like that. On the arm. But I've been seeing things that would not stop. What are you going to do about that?
That's a tough one, because no matter how many times we ask them not to have them out, we can get to the point of ejecting people from the park for having them out, and we have done it. But people are going to be stupid no matter where you go.
We don't want to see you there. My local was here, and the shoes undercover, someone was here, and they were undercover, and they go rich, and you didn't know they could easily sue you, said you should do better.
Yeah, it is a challenge that operations staff face every day. So they do have a procedure of dealing with it, and they'll adapt it as needed as they move forward. So we'll go up to the back up there.
Going back to Soaring Timbers, I had the extreme pleasure of riding that during the first week or so of operations. What happened, and is it going to be fixed to put it back to that? That was a fabulous ride when it first opened, and it's just not the same.
So Soaring Timbers is a different ride cycle than it is now.
Yeah.
The original ride cycle ended up destroying the gearbox that was on it. So we cannot. In order to go back to the original cycle would mean to put a larger gearbox in. The problem is that the frame size where the gearbox box sits is limited. We cannot, without re-engineering the ride and building a larger housing for the gearbox, we can't get a larger gearbox in there. So to prevent that gearbox from self-destructing again, we needed to tone the ride down. Sorry?
The wheel gears on the bison and Yukon Striker, were those Wonderland like
Question was about the wheel heaters on Leviathan and Yukon Striker. Those are B&Ms. They do provide that, and we asked for that in our contract with B&M for Yukon Striker. They added them in Leviathan year 4 or something. Up in the back. That's a tough one. If you had asked me that back in March, I may have known it. Colin will have that answer in just a minute. We'll go into another question after that. Go in the front. Question was what model of ride? It'll be a Zamperla Flying Tigers ride. Okay.
Yeah, so in some parks, like Carowinds, they've been given like their version of Action Theater and upgrade, or they convert it to like modern and familiar ride. Is it possible for something like that to happen in the Action Theater during Wonderland?
Question was about Action Theater, and is it possible to get an upgrade there similar to Carowinds, and anything is possible. I can't speak for future projects. People always ask me, what are we doing next year? And I say, wait and see, you'll have to wait and see. So it is possible. There will be something happening in Action Theater in the next couple of years. We'll go here.
How come Wild Switzer has
Question was about Wild Beast and the quality of the ride, I guess. It does get winter work done on it. It's tough because a group like yours goes and rides hybrid coasters, and then they come back and ride our wood coasters, and they're not the same. They can't even be compared. So both of the rides are rough. And when you get spoiled on rides like Yukon Striker and Leviathan and Behemoth, you ride those things and you think, wow, this is extreme. But it's not that much different than it was 25 years ago. We do accelerometer tests on these coasters every year. We compare the accelerations in all 3 axes, X, Y, and Z, and we look for those spikes and we eliminate those spikes. So it's a personal opinion, I guess, of how rough it is, but we base our work on science rather than on opinion. Go here. So the question was, why is backlit stunt coaster so rough? I put that back to, we do accelerometer tests on all of our coasters. We base the performance of our rides on science, not on opinion. We don't live in a world of democracy where everyone votes and says this is what we should be doing next year. We do it based on reason and on science, okay? Go here.
What input do you guys take with Cedar Fair for what rides more of action here?
The question was, what kind of input do we get on ride selection for the future? We get a fairly we get a lot of say in what we get to do. The park, or Cedar Fair asks us what we would like to do. We give our suggestions, and typically they agree. Sometimes there's some pull and tug, but we typically get what we suggest. Okay. We'll go right there.
I don't know if it's cool to ask or not, but the last time Valraven had a problem, it put it down for quite a long time. But first of all, congrats, you had almost no downtime. I was really impressed. What was the difference in the 2 situations? What sort of checks were done on a Yukon Striker to make sure the same kind of thing wasn't going to happen here?
So the question was about Yukon Striker and Valraven. Valraven had an issue this summer and it was closed for a period of time. They are very similar. They're not the same coaster. They were built by the same company, and the control system was designed and supplied by the same company as well. When the issue happened on Valraven, we stopped operation of our ride until we could definitively determine what the issue was at Valraven. Once that issue was determined, we found that possibility did not exist on our ride. We take safety very seriously in this park and in this industry. Everyone thinks that our brand is fun, but at the bottom of our business, our motto or our approach is always safety. If we cannot provide a safe environment for our guests, we won't do it. If we have to stop a ride and we have to shut it down because we have to make it right, that's what we do. And some people don't like that, but if I can't put my kids on it, or if Colin can't put his kids on it, we're not going to run it. And we won't put your kids on it either. So we'll go up in the back.
Hi again. Are there any plans to reconfigure the backlot cafe so that the drinks could be before the cashier stand, so that instead of taking them out altogether?
Oh, yeah!
Question was about Backlot Cafe, and you're talking about the bar? Is that what you're talking about?
Sorry, the soda foundry.
The soda fountain where there's no light.
No, none there anymore. I know it's not a wise question.
It's always more like getting up.
So, yeah, I can't speak for that. I wasn't part of that decision, unfortunately.
Could you bring it up at the next meeting?
Next meeting, please, we'll pee all.
We'll go in the red shirt.
What's one ride that's no longer here that you personally wish you could bring back?
The question was, what's one ride that used to be here is gone now that I wish was back? One ride that was very popular and did a great capacity was the Zumba Flume. It was not a high thrill ride, but kids loved that ride. And it did a lot. It did a high capacity. We could do 1,500 people an hour on that ride. It was a tough ride mechanically and electrically to keep going, and that was one of the reasons why it was removed. But modern flumes, I think, have a place in parks, and one day we may see one back, so we'll see. Here, yeah. Question was, how much harder is it to maintain a wood coaster versus a steel coaster? So on a wood coaster, a lot of effort goes into the track. On a steel coaster, you don't spend as much time on the track, depending on the ride, obviously. Modern coasters, the fabrication methods are much better than they used to be, where track was bent by hand, it wasn't bent by machine. All the welds were done by hand, they weren't welded by machine. The NDT in fabrication wasn't as good. So some of our old steel coasters take a lot of time to keep them maintained. As far as the coaches and the brakes and all that, they're about the same. We dismantle the coaches, we service the brakes, the lift chain, the motors, they all get looked at every winter. But the track is where it's different. So go gray shirt up there.
On the Leviathan, regarding the lift stops, whenever they stop the strain on the lift, does that put a strain on the gearbox or the motor?
Question was on Leviathan or any other coaster, when we stop the lift chain, does it put a strain on the gearbox or motor? It doesn't put a strain on the motor. There is something called a sprag clutch on the gearbox. It's a non-return clutch. And that is what prevents the strain from going back into the gearbox. So it's a one-way clutch on the side of the box. And that takes all of the abuse on the gearbox, or for the gearbox. And it's a sacrificial part. We replaced the non-return sprag clutch on Leviathan this past summer. It failed and wouldn't hold the train. The train is sitting on the anti-rollback rack now rather than the chain holding the weight of the train. So we had to change it. We had one in stock, so we replaced it. It was down for 4 hours or something like that to make the change. All right, we'll go gray shirt here.
So what do you have to do to prepare the rides for the winter, to protect them? And what do you have to do before the season?
So the question was, what do we do to protect and maintain the rides each winter? So some rides get fully dismantled. Some of the children's rides, depending on where they are in their cycle of rebuilds, get fully dismantled. Like the wave swinger, the swing of the century, it gets taken down every 5 years. We take it right down to the ground and every component comes apart. Other rides, depending on where they are in the cycle, may just get the passenger carrying units looked at, the motors will get inspected, electrical cabinets will be looked at, connectors tightened, things will get lubricated, cleaned, worn parts will be replaced. Any of the coasters, the coaches will come back to the shop, the wheels will be removed, the restraints will be removed, worn parts will be replaced, springs will be replaced. worn upholstery will be replaced. Then once all that work's done, it'll get put back out onto the track and it'll get covered until it's time to open. Once we get ready to open, we put the ride through its paces before we load people on it. So we want to see a minimum number of cycles. So we'll want to see 200 cycles on a ride before we put a person on it. And the reason we do that is to shake it out. Because the mechanic may have forgotten to tighten a bolt, or he may have left a wrench inside it, or we don't know. And that's why we run it, and then we inspect it again. And then we run it, and then we inspect it again. And then after that's done, then we're ready to ride it. We ride it with staff, and the staff are listening, and they're feeling, and they're making sure everything feels right. And once that's done, then we're ready to open to our guests. But we want to make sure it's right. We want to make sure it's going to run safe, and we want to make sure it runs reliably. And we want it to run all summer long. And for the most part, we're successful that way. But they are machines, and they do break down. Okay.
I have two questions. I actually heard that Yukon Striker was delayed, and you know there's any possible an RMC or GCI in the future.
Question was about Yukon Striker being delayed. So we started planning for Yukon Striker in 2014. We took out Skyrider in the fall of 2014, and the ride was scheduled to be put in 2016. The ride was put on hold at that point, and Valraven was built. So yeah, you can call that delayed, you can call that shelved, you can call that whatever you want to call it. But I think we put in a quality product in the end, and it's a good ride. The other question was about RMC or GCI. Yeah, there's no plan for either of that for any of our roller coasters at this time. But like I said before, we don't know what the future holds, so wait and see. Okay.
So I know that at your office, instead of gates at the end of the platforms, they have these round pillar gates that just stay there, they're in concrete. Now, I've noticed that we've had 3 of them sitting in and I'm just wondering, are the gates going to be swapped out with those? And my second question is there any plans on to get a fresh coat paint?
So two-part question. One was about replacing the safety gates at the end of the platform with these hoop frames. That's something that we're working towards. Obviously, we operate a park in Ontario where we're governed by the TSSA, the Technical Standards and Safety Authority. So there were some challenges in getting this change made with TSSA. If we can work through those hurdles, then we'll install them. If we can't, then we won't install them. What was the question? Oh, paint job, yeah. So, our intention is to paint it at some point. I would have liked to have done it this past winter. I'm allocated a certain amount of money to do non-regular maintenance work, and certain projects rise to the list faster than others, and that's not a small job. That's a very big job to take on. And if I have to do something that improves reliability or safety, or I'll do that ahead of a paint job, unfortunately. So.
Peter, the shuttle is 53.5 inches and on the wide. What is the law that stops you from the child from being able to go to kid? Those lines are short. Would there be any way to make an exception like your parents have to wait or allow the child to go on the ride?
So the question was about letting children under the height limit ride a ride, and our position is no. The manufacturer says we have to have that. That's not our rule that we've established. So even with a waiver, we wouldn't entertain it. We would say, come back next year, eat your vegetables, and you'll do it. Red shirt.
So, Vortex, first off, great coaster, love it.
Yes.
It's getting a little older, and those coasters don't obviously have the longest of lives. What is most challenging maybe about maintaining specifically that ride? And is the goal to have it be here another 20 years and maybe not just another 10?
Question was about Vortex and the life of the ride and what it takes to keep it going, or what are the challenges. So Vortex is a coaster where track work is ongoing. The forces on that ride are extreme, and the track was, I would call it undersized or maybe not as heavy as it could have been. I think if you built that ride today, it would be more stout and it would take the forces. So we are constantly in that pond, welding and repairing that track. And we'll continue to do so. We have no plans to take it out. I think it's a great piece in our park. How long do you guys want to go here?
Do you know why Orbiter was so low to that?
Question was about Orbiter. Why was it removed? We have a tough balance to play in balancing our costs and our expense costs and passing those costs on to our customers. So we continue to add rides and we try and limit the costs that we pass on to the customers. And we cannot continue to add equipment in this park that takes maintenance and operations expense and all of those things without passing those expenses on. So at some points we have to say we have to take something out. And that was the reason of Orbiter. It provided a benefit of providing that new pathway through that area. But yeah, so you'll find that in any business. You can't continue to grow and not grow your expenses without taking something out. Well, yeah.
I know it's not your decision to make, but in this park, if you could let RMC modify one of the present hoodies, or would you prefer them to start from scratch?
Question was about RMC modifying one of our woodies or starting from scratch. It's hard to know. I mean, I think if we were going to invest that type of money in a coaster, we'd want to be able to market it as a new coaster. And to make it a new coaster, we need a different profile, a different layout, etc. So we're not heading in that direction. But if we were going to do that, that's the way we would do it. Because we wouldn't invest that money and not be able to market it as something new. You mean just sitting on the? So that's a spare brake we keep up there. Those aero brakes use air bladders in them, and they're brass lined brakes. Sometimes the brass wears thin, or the bags fail, and we need to replace them. So we have spare brakes pre-assembled. We have them for the Bat, we have them for Dragon, we have them for Vortex. And we keep them at the ready so that if we have a brake stop working, we can quickly replace the brake and get the ride back in service. That's why it's kept there. Okay, go through.
Yeah, so two questions. One, I noticed that Orbiter's pieces have started to be, I guess, shipped off somewhere. I was curious as to whether it was purchased by another park or another group. And the second question was just if you could clarify the reasoning behind the added support braces on the footings of Yukon Striker.
Two questions. The first one was about Orbiter. Orbiter is going to be scrapped. So it's being taken apart. We're removing the fiberglass from the gondolas and separating the metal from the fiberglass, and it's being responsibly disposed of. Second question was about the additional bracing in Yukon Striker. There was a foundation in the pond that was moving, so we put temporary braces in place to shore up that footing until we can get into the pond in the winter and make a permanent repair to that foundation. Okay, one more question. Ken, you want to pick who we're answering here? Okay. Question was about Vortex and taking your articles with you. We used to have on-platform storage system, so you could put your bags in there. But if you were at the ride watching that operation, it really slowed down the operation. Having people take their articles with them speeds up the cycle and shortens the wait time. That was the reason behind it. All right, I think that's it. I'll be around up front.
Yeah, we just want to each year, even for Q&A at the event, Peter and whoever else different every year comes down and spends the time with us. So we really appreciate the time that you guys take to come out here, answer our questions, and talk with us. So Peter and Colin, thank you very much on behalf of the Asian Friends. And just have to throw this in because I'm slightly biased. We won the golden ticket for something.
Okay, I'll be around up front here for another question if you guys want, but I'm going to let everybody else go. I wish you a good evening tonight, and thanks for making the trip out.
Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like the video, comment with anything you'd like me to cover in the future, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and support me on Patreon so that I can visit more parks and create more wonderful videos.